Welcome back to Two Gals in a Glass Half Full. Today, I'm super excited. I have an old friend on who is now a psychiatrist and doing awesome things down in Louisiana. But before we get started, Dr. Jess, what is in your glass?
So I am working on my smoothie this morning. I haven't really gotten started, but the goal is it needs to be finished rather soon. So that way I will be full and I'll have all of the goodness of protein, microgreens, flaxseed, chia seed, dark fruits, homemade cashew milk. So, and then I'll be full of goodness. So Dr. Bobbie, what's in your glass?
Today, I am just having some water. I feel like I've been boring lately by just water every day, but it's like my favorite thing to have in the breakfast after Um, it's my favorite thing to have in the morning after breakfast because I feel like it's when I get my most water intake, is when I'm eating. So
Uh,
yeah.
I like it. And so today we have a special guest. Obviously, Dr. Bobbie already said this is one of her friends, but before we do full intros, Amanda, what's in your glass?
So I also have a glass of ice water and just finished my breakfast, scrambled eggs and bell peppers from my little garden. So it's
Yay.
really, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. So I live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm a practicing psychiatrist at a veterans clinic. So work with male and female, but in that particular population. And I'm also a geriatric psychiatrist, so specialize with, individuals with dementia and the particular, mental health concerns that come with aging. I did my training at LSU as far as undergrad. I was a collegiate athlete at that time and met Dr. Bobbie, through that circle. And then from there, I did my medical school and my residency and fellowship in South Carolina. Finished up in Charleston, South Carolina, Medical University of South Carolina 2 years ago and wanted to move back home. Having had two children while I was there. And it's great to be around family. I'm going to have my third child next month, and I've been married for 10 years. So that's a little, nutshell of me.
I love that. And I think we also heard that you had some specialty in the postpartum population. And one, you've experienced it, right? More than once and are about to experience it again. But then also from the psychiatry perspective, having training to prepare you to help individuals going through this phase of life. And so that's something that I think is really an important topic to talk about because oftentimes I think people think, oh, it's this physical thing that happens, right? So I grow a baby, I deliver a baby, and now I take care of the baby. But we forget about all of the other things that come with being pregnant, delivery, and then that postpartum time frame. And so can you highlight a little bit like what are some of those like major changes that are happening from like that hormonal level that can lead to some of that difficulty that people might experience after delivery?
Sure. I mean, the basis of what's going on during pregnancy is to prepare our body to create life. We have this increase in hormones, and once you get to delivery, basically you're just shutting everything down abruptly. And what that does to not only your body, but your emotional state. And there's so many unique changes that go on during that period that compounded by being a new mom and figuring out how to raise this newborn child. Sleep deprivation, it really adds this recipe that creates a high percentage of women who have difficulties with certain components with their mental health. And that's what I talk to my patients about, and what I see quite a few patients for in my clinic, and have in the past. So letting them know that that's something that it's part of the process, and kind of creating an environment that there's nothing wrong with them, and coming up with a treatment plan to help them and support them through that. So that's a little bit about what's going on, and then when I step in and when somebody sees me for the first time.
I can remember when I found out. So my little girl was a surprise and a big surprise, and not a surprise I was ready for. And during that time, I had a lot going on in my life. I had just decided to start like opening my own clinic. I was going through fellowship. I had planned to go to Europe in the summer where she was supposed to be born. And I just remember it was so hard. I was both so excited for her, but at the same time mourning like the loss of the life that I thought I was supposed to be having in the next year. And I just remember that internal struggle so much with it. And my boyfriend at the time didn't quite understand that because their body's not going through anything. They're not feeling any difference. Their life's not changing in that moment of being pregnant. But I just can remember that it was so tough. And I like was something wrong with me? You know, I found myself asking that a lot. Is something wrong with me? And it's the more I talked and talked to other people, I was like, no, a lot of people like this is normal. It's okay. Like you almost kind of have to mourn that what you were planning on. So then you can let go and enjoy what you have.
Exactly. There's a lot of emotions and grieving, different things, and everybody's unique in that, and recognizing that it's okay to feel angry, sad, whatever you need to feel. Um, and then, also kind of creating this environment that, what's next and hopeful with what's next. And,
Mhm.
there is more, even when we're saying goodbye to something that we were really passionate about or hopeful for in the past. So, that's a really good point. And we hear that often speaking to, women who become pregnant. And then, just after having a baby and it's not quite what you expected for different reasons. So many things can come up, and, that's what we talk about and work through together.
Yeah.
I remember like when I was postpartum the first time, I didn't know what to expect exactly, but like normal human interaction, like you do something and the other human gives you some sort of like affirmation that like, yay, like I am happy to be talking with you or whatever, right? You get a smile, you get a gesture, you get a word, whatever that is. But when a baby is so little, they don't really give you that, right? Like it takes a little while for them to start smiling and cooing and stuff like that. I was like, man, I'm working really hard. Could you give me a little feedback? Am I doing good? Not doing good? One way or the other, Like, come on, little dude. Like it was kind of like funny how like obviously, like the little one's not gonna be able to smile and coo and all that right away. And you know that logically, but like when it's the first time, you're so invested and you've got
Mhm.
so much time spent with this like one little creature. I was like, man, I wasn't prepared for that. Like it was interesting.
Definitely. Being unprepared, that sounds like an understatement. And is different too. So you don't know what you're going to get with each child. They're so unique, which is special, but can come with challenges as well. So
Absolutely. Yeah. One like isolating. I mean, if especially not, I mean, I don't I think a lot of women after they have babies can very much be isolated. And like I know I was after my first kiddo, my husband was at work during the day, right? So I was home all day by myself. Luckily he was home at night. It wasn't like he was deployed or something where I was like truly by myself. But you don't have somebody necessarily next to you saying like you got this, you're doing great, and you're like, am I? I've never done this before. I'm totally faking this. And like little dude isn't like laughing and clapping. But I mean, he cries, but not awful. But it's like you're kind of like, am I failing at this? Am I okay? And it's like I think that happens to a lot of women and first time moms. You're like, oh, I really hope I'm okay. Like, but you're kind of shooting in the dark.
absolutely. Yes, that could be really isolating when you're by yourself, just you and your newborn, um, versus if you have other kids too, but not having a lot of adult interaction. And, so we do talk a lot with our women about social support and having routines and just kind of creating that new normal, so that we can minimize some of that downtime, but also making sure you're resting too. It's just such a balance. And we kind of facilitate some of those things, just to have those discussions, and even interacting with your doctor. It's a really good opportunity, to voice the concerns, but to come up with a plan, like even practical tips. Some women feel that obligation that they're the ones who are going to do all the night feeding. So sleep is so important. So we also focus on that quite a bit. So coming up with a plan as far as, can dad take some nights, or can you have a certain schedule, something that works for both of you. But if you're not sleeping, and that's going to carry over into your day, and that anxiety, and, that feeling of guilt, so many things that can happen. So, it's definitely a period where a lot's going on.
Mhm.
I was blessed when I live with my parents, and we have my neighbors who are like her grandparents. And so I, kind of the opposite of Jess, I had a lot of support, which is great. It also comes with a lot of advice, and a lot of you should, and a lot of you need, and a lot of outside opinions. But I can remember just though you saying sleep at nights, and we found out by about 2.5 weeks, we found out she has a protein allergy to dairy. And so she was screaming, babies are supposed to sleep. You hear this, they're supposed to sleep most of the day. And I mean, we were lucky if we got like 1 to 2 hour naps a day. And if we got a few hours of sleep at night. So she was like up most of the time. And I just remember at one point, like looking at her and like kind of understanding how shaken baby syndrome happens after you've been screaming for hours and days at a time. And I just looked at her, I'm like, what is wrong? Like, can you please be quiet for 2 seconds? And it was nice, to have my mom or my boyfriend, someone step in at that point. But man, sleep is so important.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. Absolutely. My first baby slept better than my second baby. And, I remember just recognizing a few months in that, this baby, my second was very colicky, and, was up all hours of the night, and just having this kind of like acceptance that, I'm going to struggle a little bit, and I'm not always going to be at my best. And so there was a lot of that, and looking back, because when you're in the moment, it's so overwhelming, like you said, like, just kind of some irrational, and, stressful thoughts come into your mind. But then, when you kind of just like sit back and look at the pattern, you're exhausted, but you kind of go through that muddy water. You're like, you're supposed to be sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night, and I'm sleeping 2 hours at a time. So I remember that brought some peace. It was kind of strange for me, but I would actually see which nights I was sleeping. Like if I tracked how much I slept, I'm like, oh, if I only slept like 3 hours, I'm going to give myself more grace this day. But oh, she slept like a 3 or 4 hour stretch. So okay. And then there is a thing called sleep deprivation, and how that works over time. So I didn't want to get to a certain point of sleep deprivation. And I'm a little bit, I wouldn't, I like routines, and I like numbers and things like that. So, I kind of just use measures to know when I really needed to look at my red flags, and when, I had to call in help with family. And I try and just kind of adapt some of those kind of monitoring yourself strategies. Because some women say that their babies sleep all through the night, and, it's less of what we're talking about. But, like you, Dr. Bobbie, you never know. And, there's unique challenges that come with every newborn baby at times. So I'm sorry you had to go through that. Hopefully she's sleeping.
Better, better, better. But it's I think a hard thing, and not sure if you talk to a lot of your patients about this, or if like there's for me a hard thing was asking for help. I'm the mom. I feel like I should do this.
Mhm.
I shouldn't need help, like, and so a lot of that talk, and like being okay of like, can you please watch her for 2 hours? I need to sleep. Like I just need, something. So that was a really hard lesson to learn. It was like, it's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely. So, just encouraging mothers to be okay with that, and that we all need help, and, all the challenges that are working against you, and how it ultimately helps you, be stronger, for yourself and for your baby. So, I mean, I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but those are things that, moms need to hear. And, we're kind of in this mentality, like we need to be superwoman and take it on, and like we should be able to handle it. And that's, you know, whether you should handle it, whether you want to handle it, like we know that we need people, so I talk a lot about preventing isolation and reaching out to supports, with all my population of patients I work with. So just normalizing that, and, letting them know, as far as you'd want to be there if somebody was in a similar situation, or even going through half the stress you're going through. So it's okay. Ask for help, and we're here for you. If it's a situation where, maybe something going on with depression is really preventing that reaching out, we try and facilitate that too. If I'm really worried about someone, and, symptoms get to a certain point, then, I'm going to offer to reach out to family and advocate for them too. So that's kind of something I like to do as well.
Yeah, I think we forget sometimes, and I don't know if it's our culture in particular or what, but really we're meant to be in societies, right? In groups and clans. We're not like individual lone fighters off doing our own thing. That's actually like anti our nature and how we are supposed to be kind of in this group. So it takes two people to make a baby, right? And typically in the family unit, you're gonna have, two parents, but then many clans have aunts, uncles, friends that act like aunts and uncles, grandparents, siblings below, cousins. Like all of this is meant to be how that whole unit kind of functions to support each other. So it like I had to remember that my first time, because it was like, gosh, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And so when my mom was there for the first 2 weeks, I was fine, right? Because I just needed one person to bounce this off of. Like, what do you
Mhm.
think about? Like, do you think this is right? And she would say, if you feel it's right, then yeah, probably is. Okay, great. Just that little bit, right? Like that little bit of just like that affirmation of, you've been down this road, I haven't. I know it's a different road, but it's like a similar road. So like, what do you think? She's like, well, it's been many years since I've done this, but it looks good to me. Great. Like, so I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, I don't know, like putting butt paste on or whatever you're doing for the first time. You're like, how much, when do I put it on? Do I wait for diaper rash? Do I do it preventatively? I don't know. Like I see people use butt paste, so some of those, like, it seems silly, but like, you really don't know, and you feel like such an idiot. You're like, I swear I know things in life, but right now I feel like a total buffoon. So and it's like feeling like a buffoon by yourself is not a good place to be. Like really like reaching out and having those people around you. For me, like I luckily had another friend who was pregnant and at the same time as me, and our babies were 3 weeks apart. So her and I, like, we went walking. It might take me an hour and a half to get packed up to get there. But you know what? We did. And we walked and we talked. And we would just tell stories of like, what do you think about this? I don't know. What do you think about that? I don't know either. But I'm doing the same thing as you are. So it must be okay. They're still alive. Like every time we'd meet, we're like, hey, another week, they're still alive. So we're doing okay, right? Like, but like I couldn't be isolated. I just knew it. I was like, I'm gonna go nuts. So that little bit was like, it made all the difference for me. One person to talk to for me was pivotal. So I think that's just something that it's it doesn't have to necessarily be this perfect scenario where you've got, grandparents that live right next door and all that kind of stuff. I mean, this was somebody that I wasn't really that close with before. We weren't like besties. We just happened to be at the same phase in life together. So like, I know Dr. Bobbie, you have that group that you do, that the mom group with the strollers, and you work out, right?
Yeah.
There's groups like that all over the place. So like, there's ways of reaching out and finding like that one person that you kind of jive with. That's like, hey, I'm faking it too, right? Right? Or should be honest.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Amanda, one of the things that we were talking before this, you said a lot of postpartum is like depression, anxiety.
Mhm.
What if someone what does that look like? I know it's going to be different for each person, each case, but what are
Mhm.
some symptoms we might be able to see in ourselves of like, oh, hey, maybe I need to reach out for help?
Right. So, typical symptoms of depression may include, feeling low, low energy, low motivation, changes in your appetite, whether it's up or down, sleep disturbances, and then, guilt, feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, and then, some individuals can even have thoughts of, you know, wishing they weren't here. And then with postpartum women in particular, what we see a little bit more, or hear a little bit more, is difficulty like connecting with their newborn, or feeling connected with people in general. And then we actually see a lot more anxiety and irritability. So it's kind of like this anxious distress that we hear more with postpartum depression. And sometimes that's related to anxiety as well. And of course, sleep disturbances contribute to some of those symptoms. So another another symptom would be isolation. So you could see some of these symptoms are connected, and just with having a newborn and all the responsibilities involved, it kind of makes sense. But at the same time, I would say that if you start having dedicated blocks of time to rest or even get some sleep, and you're not because of some of these symptoms, that's definitely a concern. And then a lot of times just checking in with people who know you and love you, and there's going to be some challenges, or you look tired and things like that, but I think just recognizing what your loved ones are saying too, that could be helpful. And just to know that something maybe needs to be addressed, and maybe some changes. Not saying you need to stop what you're doing and you know start taking a medicine or something, but even if you're just checking in with your doctor and seeing if this is okay, or like we talked about, getting more connected, talking to people more, trying to establish more routines, reaching out for help, those sort of things.
Absolutely. And so let's say like you do all this stuff, right? So you've tried getting more sleep. You've really like, I mean, you're really trying to like, okay, every day I'm going to meet somebody to walk at 10 a.m. Or, you really implement a lot of these strategies, and it's not like, it just isn't helping you bump out of it. And you're just not kind of getting back to feeling like you again. What are different treatments that are available? Right? Because I think sometimes it's
Mhm.
like we can do the things that we can do on our own, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so when it doesn't, what options fall into line there?
Yeah. So, what I usually talk to patients about is, one of two options, and or both options. So you could do, evidence-based therapy, that's more structured as far as meeting with someone consistently, and um, going over different patterns that are contributing to some of these symptoms, and setting goals. There's so many different evidence-based therapies. Most of it is cognitive based. But what we kind of talk about before that is behavioral strategies, doing the things we're supposed to do. But, the next step would be discussing therapy and seeing a trained specialist, whether it's a postpartum counselor, and there's many out there. And then another one would be, sometimes you have postpartum counselors who do group therapies, and that's also a really good structured environment to get help. So you have individual therapy, you have group therapy, and then, I may come into play as well as far as consideration for medications to help with how you're feeling. And, usually if we're having these symptoms despite, changes that we're making on our own, then we would talk about medicines for depression and anxiety, sometimes insomnia, but, that's a little bit tricky. And, also with considerations of breastfeeding. So a lot of the discussions I have when medications come into place, are the risk and benefits of their depression or anxiety, um, and it being untreated, and then the medications, potential risk and benefits to the mom and the newborn. And so we have a lot of resources now as far as medications that are compatible with breastfeeding, also ones in pregnancy, but we're talking about postpartum. So, these are pieces of information that I'm laying out for my patients. And so, if somebody is more interested in a group therapy versus an individual therapy versus medicine or doing everything, everybody's different, but having those options, available and explained, um, and even evidence on how women do with that. And so I mentioned medication, so that there are newer classes of medicines too, specifically like hormonal type medicines, that are kind of up and coming. So they're not readily available everywhere. But, there's a lot of research in this area because we know it's a vulnerable population. So I also, as a doctor, I'm staying up to date in these newer treatments, and um, we're able to connect people, whether it's locally or it's kind of just where everybody's at, but we do really well with, our traditional antidepressants, and there's quite a few medicines that work out very well, usually with therapy. But like I said, it's really up to everybody. I have working moms who say they cannot do structured therapy. They don't have the time for it. Let's get a medication on board. So it really just depends on the unique situation of the mom and the baby, which, we're gonna discuss that, and that's completely okay.
Mhm. I think the key is that you're really hearing the individual and saying like, what are my must-haves and what are my barriers? And, really trying to get them through it in a safe way. Because you can, that's the thing. It's very treatable. There's just like anything else, there's certain things that, we can, in the PT world, we can do very simply with some basic exercises and we get them out. It's super easy. Some stuff is a lot more complicated and it needs more nuance and it needs more attention. It still doesn't mean that like we can still get you out the door and just, there you go, back at it. So I do think it's important to really take that moment and say, I'm recognizing that this is more than what I can handle on my own. And that's hard to realize, I think that's a very brave step, to say I'm looking for help. And that doesn't mean anything other than you are way, way brave. And it's, nobody wants to be vulnerable. That's the opposite of how we want to feel. And really, truly putting, into somebody else's hands saying, I would like help. I mean, that's so many people don't. And so it's the strong ones that do, in my
Absolutely.
opinion. Yeah.
No, I agree.
So, Dr. Amanda, we really appreciate all of your information. I think it's just a big topic that a lot of people, I just think you don't have this realization. Everybody throws baby showers and you're so excited and you do the nursery and you have all this stuff. And then afterwards, you're just kind of like, ugh, this is really hard and I'm so tired and I don't know what I'm doing. And it's the hormones that were like going stop and you're trying to breastfeed maybe for the first time or whatever. Everything is a first. It's just a very hard time. It just is. Even if you have an easy baby, it's hard. If you have a difficult baby, woof. I mean, yeah, Dr. Bobbie had her struggles. Man, my first, woof. I mean, we were at the doctor all the time. Oh, just like he didn't sleep. I mean, well, he was 18 months old and then he finally slept through the night. I mean, it was like I think I twitched for a while. But like it is what it is. You can get through it. It just is not an easy time in life, right?
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's women out there that are willing to talk about it. And so I think that's important to know that like normalizing it, no matter who you are, this is hard. This is a
Mhm.
very hard time. Like even if you're like a rock star everywhere else, it's difficult. So that's okay to say like, hey, like friend, can you pick up the phone? I just need to bounce something off of you, you know? And it's brave to ask for help. Super brave. Yeah.
My favorite would be because my daughter's challenging. She is challenging. Anyone that's met her has said she's challenging. My mom said she's the most difficult baby she's ever met. My mom's had a lot of babies, so but I love her and I wouldn't change anything about her. But it's like weird when people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, is she such a good baby?" And it's like, well, I love her a lot and I think she's great. I was like, she's challenging. I don't, but the looks they give me because they're so used to everyone just being, oh yeah, she's a great baby or he's a great baby. And it was just like made me almost feel like terrible as a parent to like be like, no, she's not great, but she's challenging and I love her and I wouldn't change her.
Right. That's honest, right?
That
Like,
is
Yeah.
broad and
honesty is
honest.
okay. Yeah.
So, but I remember just some of the looks and people, like random people that don't know me, they'd be like, hmm.
Like, I don't sugarcoat things. This is
Right.
yeah. At least what you know is coming out of my mouth is gonna be honest. I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Awesome. All right,
Well,
everybody.
thank you, Amanda.
Yeah. I was gonna say thank you so much for Amanda. Thank you for kind of laying out some of the framework of like what are some of the things that we want to look for as far as like when do we maybe take it to that next step and seek some more professional help. Like getting too isolated, the structure of the schedule is not working, getting extra sleep isn't working, you're still having that struggle with anxiety, maybe, heart rate's getting a little bit high, not, just I think sometimes just not feeling like like you feel like you kind of lost you. It's that there's people out here that specialize in this and they're good at it. So we'll put in our show notes, some of Dr. Amanda's information. And everybody, if you like watching, please like and follow and share this episode with somebody that you might think would benefit. So if you know somebody in your life that's like maybe pregnant and doesn't yet know like what's coming, it's okay to like say, hey, kind of, know that it's going to be hard and have that conversation and share. So stay tuned for next week.